Now, with us, we have a situation in Iran or around Israel. Personally, I'm confused. But today we have a memorandum of understanding with the United States and Iran. And with us is Amin Nayebpour. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me again. Third time.
Of course, of course. And as we know, you are a geopolitical risk analyst, and you are our expert on what's happening with the Iran situation in the Middle East, broadly speaking. Can you walk us through what's going on? Because I'm confused.
Sure. So one thing, thank you for saying memorandum of understanding and not deal, because there's a legal definition, differentiation between these two. So memorandum of understanding has two characteristics. One, that is not legally binding. It doesn't even have any legality to it. So, and two, it's extremely vague. So it just gives you the very general things that we are going to talk about. And it doesn't say we are going to, agree on these points. We're just going to talk about it. And as President Trump says, let's see what happens. So that's number one. How did we get there? 28th of February, President Trump started the Operation Epic Fury. And it's important that he said operation. It wasn't a war. And I think he was right about it, because it was just an air campaign. And you never achieve any regime change by air campaign. And he never stated regime change as one of his goals. So after 30 days of operations, it was a ceasefire. Why did that happen? Because the Islamic regime in Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz. Oil prices went up. There was lots of uncertainty into the oil markets. And then that's when Trump decided to block their blockade.
Right.
It means that if they don't allow anyone to sell oil, we're not going to allow them to sell oil either. So that actually resulted in a really economic downturn in them, because after that happened,
in the Iranians.
In Iran, yeah.
Okay.
So inflation went up to it was 70% already. It went up onto 150. And from the reports that I was getting, you had scarcity of really basic stuff there. So cement, fertilizers, really basic stuff. So actually the blockade was working. But what happened after that was that President Trump decided to go into negotiation phase.
So just to pull it back, right? When it comes, because you said it's not legally binding. This is not anything official.
Right.
Am I right in saying that it's not official?
Perfect,
All right.
yeah.
This is more of a comma than a period in a sentence.
Exactly.
How, because people are calling it a deal. It's not a deal.
Yeah.
It's more of a memorandum. It's exactly what you said. What are the necessary steps to go forward to ensure that the United States military presence in Iran is not warranted? I don't think it ever was warranted, but what would be the necessary next steps in order for us to avoid further air campaigns and further boots in the ground, further war?
So there's a principle in war and international relations that war is a continuation of politics, but with other means. So it's a famous thing by Clausewitz, the famous war general, Prussian war general.
Yeah.
So President Trump said, we want their uranium, and we don't want them to have any enrichment. I think this is what he really wants. The other things are I think they're just tangential. Maybe he wants to, give them some idea of what I don't want or what I do want. So I think it's his tactic. But this, he really wants that. So first he starts with the air campaign. That's one way of getting going into politics. Two, he goes into negotiations. If he gets the uranium, why not? That's a very good thing to do.
How do we know they have uranium? And the reason I asked the question is in 2008, Ron Paul put out a book, The Revolution, one of my favorite books. I'm currently reading it. And we saw that in 2003, there were claims of WMDs in Iraq, blatantly false, right? Same thing for many other countries, chemical weapons, terrorism, many of those claims were false. And whose fault that is, that can be debated later. But how do we know for a fact that there is uranium being enriched for the use of nuclear warfare by Iran?
You never can be 100% certain, that's for sure. So one is you have satellite images, you can guess. And two, there are some IAEA reports that said they have that. And they are credible because they were there on the ground, actually. So you can trust them more or less. And also, I'm guessing, you know, the Israelis have really good intelligence on the ground. So they have people on the ground, and they have it's not the first time they have it. Like they had it 10 years ago, last year that they started their operation, the 12-day war.
Mhm.
So they confirmed it. So I think there is uranium there as for sure. Maybe, but now is like how deep is it in the ground? Is it like very deep in the ground? Do we even care about, you know, getting it out? But it doesn't matter really. It's a risk, because this regime has exhibited some very bad and rogue type of behavior. So you really don't want these folks to be anywhere near this, you know, highly enriched uranium, because you don't know what they're going to do. They've lied before. And funny thing is that I was actually looking at their Telegram channels. This one guy who used to be the political advisor to the previous supreme leader, Khamenei, he was telling
Mhm.
that
That there was uranium.
that not only that we had uranium, but we were seeking to build a bomb. And he was saying that. And it was not only a plan, they actually wanted to build a bomb. So all this time that they were saying, oh, you know, all this, we don't know about it, they actually did want to build a bomb. And you really cannot trust these guys with these stuff. And I won't even trust them with, you know, ballistic missiles, to be honest with you.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
They can hit American bases very easily. I mean, they hit one in Diego Garcia during the operation.
They did, yes.
I mean, you don't want that to happen.
No, never. But gentlemen, you two have been awfully quiet. I want to get your opinions.
Well,
on this.
we're getting our guest the view.
He is the expert. So
He's the expert.
I'm learning as well.
I'll put in my view. I mean, I said it earlier in earlier episodes of the show. I think we're getting into the WMB MD conversation, and obviously I think this country has Iraq war brain. That was my take early on, and I think we incorrectly tied a lot of the early political conversation to that. The reality is Iran and Iraq are very different things. Iran has been the head of a terrorist financing snake since 1979. They totally changed the fate and direction of the region since that time. I agree with you that I think regime change was never necessarily. I think President Trump would have liked to see it and would have taken it as a result, but it represented like an A+ version of success. What I think has been instead achieved is a B+ version, which at this point they'll take, and let's get an MOU. We don't, you know, it's kind of we're at a status quo stalemate. Both sides are. Iran has incentives to get to the table. Do we trust them? No, but we're going to put something on a document. I think what we saw the last week is, you know, of course, this is over a much exaggerated time scale, but we saw maybe the end of the first Punic War. The Punic Wars, Roman Carthage. There was a second one. There was a third one. I do think there will be comma rather than a period, if you will, or the next paragraph. I do think we'll see hostilities rise up again, but I think for the time being, both sides have a incentive to tend to other matters for the time being. As you mentioned, the economic pressures on Iran. And I think on the U.S. side, it's more of, we have achieved the B+ victory. It doesn't look like the people are rising up to do a regime change. We don't see evidence of that. And I think there are political, not just with us, but our allies too. There are political domestic coalitional pressures on the president and reasons to get to an understanding and a new status quo. But at the end of the day, I do think the U.S. has achieved something here. We've achieved the destruction of their military and political leadership. And really on the military side, we can go back to Soleimani, who you can tie to the deaths of 800 soldiers in the conflicts that I was a part of. And so this military conflict with Iran has really been much more tied to the global war on terror rubric that did kind of feel like it had an endpoint with the Afghanistan withdrawal. But the absolute driver of that whole paradigm, the Soviet Union, if you will, of if the war on terror is the Cold War, the new Cold War, if there is a country that is the Soviet Union, it's Iran, and it's Iran, and always has been.
Yeah.
So I think that's how I see it from a military and political, geopolitical perspective. And we'll see what the next steps are, but there's no doubt that military, politically, a substantial progress has been made, and the U.S. had 13 casualties. You know, I'm a soldier, I'm a veteran. That's still 13 more than I'd like to see, but considering what has been accomplished, 13 is also how many we lost in the Afghanistan withdrawal, which was one of the most shameful and embarrassing foreign policy fiascos in U.S. history, as far as I'm concerned. So something that actually tangibly has been accomplished, the ball has been moved forward and down the field, if you will, to perhaps a better day for the region. And I can't help but notice the behavior of the countries around the region, and seeing at least some desire for getting back on the Abraham Accords track.
You bring up a very good point, and I wanted to ask this, Amin. So I'm again learning as I go with you, because again, you are our expert, and I'll read all the headlines. I'll read the New York Post. I still don't have a full scope of what's going on. I do know that President Trump wants, and quote me if I'm wrong, the uranium enrichment to totally stop. The Iranians will not stop it. Is that our red line? Is that the line they won't cross? Because it looks to me like that might be a part of the memorandum. And I don't think either side is going to budge on that. How do we mitigate that? How do we resolve that problem? That's probably the largest issue we have right now is the uranium.
I think so. Yeah, they're going to agree on many points, but the uranium issue is their existential threat. So, and because one, they think of it as a deterrent, and two, they don't trust Trump. They said, look, JCPOA, we gave our uranium, and you went out of it, and that was a good move by Trump, actually. And three, you were telling us that we're negotiating, but then you attacked us. So they have a full skepticism of Trump, and their uranium is their card. And I don't think they're going to give it away for sure. My guess is that because why does America want their uranium? Basically, you can put all of this in the rubric of Iran behaving like a normal state. Right now is really a rogue state. Is financing all these terror networks, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and their proxies in Iraq, which killed a lot of American soldiers. And nobody talks about that because they all talk about the Houthis and the Hezbollah, which are the big ones. But they had like all these small proxies in Iraq, which were very responsible for American blood. But going back in the 80s, they had this big explosion in Beirut that killed also American soldiers.
1983.
Exactly. Yeah. So they've shown a consistent behavior of a rogue nation, and you can tolerate that thing to a point. After that, when you see that you are, so I think Trump is kind of building a new world order, which is basically he wants to come, which resembles actually Nixon's doctrine, which he wants to come out of the Middle East and put one of his allies there, which I think is UAE and Israel. So America can focus on China, but it cannot just go out. It's going to create a vacuum. It's going to be the same quagmire that was in Iraq. So it has to make this regime weak enough so those two can take care of it. Do regime change, do whatever they want. I see it in that way. So America can come out and focus on the Western Hemisphere and China. And but imagine if the scenario that you have Iran as an ally of America, like previous in the revolution, you're basically controlling that extremely important waterway, which is supplying China with 70% of its oil. That's a huge.
That's massive.
That's incredible. And if he achieves that, I think he's going to be one of the greatest presidents in American history.
I'd agree. I think President Trump is the first actual realist president we've had since Nixon. I think every president in between Nixon and Trump believed in some version of a liberal international order, which I've always felt is a bit like the Holy Roman Empire. Wasn't liberal, wasn't international, wasn't much of an order. And it largely served a very narrow set of interests, largely multinational corporations and the diplomatic globalist elite, basically. And I don't think it made the world any safer either. I think what President Trump is doing, and what serious thinkers that do want to see a safer world are seeing in his actions, is that reorienting of global order, which looks a lot more like a chessboard. And I get that of course on the left in American politics, they're going to hate whatever Trump does.
Yes.
So that's a given. And I saw the early polling out of this support for MOU, and it's plus 43 support for it. So that's huge support, which is another big reason I think this is happening.
Yeah.
Not just coalition tending, but it also relieves a lot of political pressure and sets up Trump and the Republicans well for the midterms. But it was that plus 43 was like 56 and then 13 against it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole lot of people not weighing in. And those are basically Democrats who are also with the 53, who just can't let Trump have any victory because it breaks their worldview. And then the 13 is probably, I mean, those on the left criticize. I mean, it's very weird because the anti-war left is always
just to pull it back super quick.
Very pathetic, but there is an anti-war right out there that I think you're representing and you're trying to.
Well, I
Well,
want to.
of course.
I know. Yeah, I think Troy wanted to hand that off to you, but I just want to say from a communications perspective, and Ian McMath here, president. It's not president. President of nothing. Excuse me. Starts with a P though. Press secretary of the New York Young Republican Club. I think that the communications of the Trump administration has been pretty consistent throughout this whole conflict. And when people tell me to clarify what's going on, they usually bring to me talking points that are of the left-wing media or the dissident right, or in whatever case may be, it's secondhand information that's taking whatever the president and the administration is messaging it and twisting it for their own political ends. The left wants nothing more than to see Trump fail, just like in this situation with the reflecting pool, which always had algae in it and was always a problem in the summertime. And now you have the left-wing media suddenly all over it, and you have allegedly crazy activists going there to vandalize it. That no matter what Trump does in the Iran war, the left is always going to find some fault with it and campaign against it. Now they say that the MOU is a humiliation.
They're saying it's an admission of defeat.
Yeah, and
essentially,
and then also the dissident right is doing the same thing, and also the neocons. So it seems like that actually we're in an interesting place where everyone who has their own wants to put their own political spin because they want to position themselves as saying that Trump has done a horrible job with the Iran situation. But I think that of all the presidents, he's the one that refused to kick the can down the road. Something had to be done. And the worst thing that could be done is nothing, and to let the problem continue to fester. And people are complaining that the MOU is nothing like the JCPOA agreement, which, or I should say, is a worse arrangement than the JCPOA deal. But that is nonsense, because that would have expired by now, and it never really had many teeth on it, and
they cheated a lot.
And they cheated, and I think that the presidential administration has been consistent that it's all about Iran not being able to have a nuclear weapon. That's the baseline. And then for people that are complaining that this is happening, Iran's behavior from 1979 to 1983 to the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and having their proxies poison the well of the Middle East to create constant conflict, that is the root of the issue. And you can't turn this around and say that President Trump has created some sort of failure where there was this festering problem that had to be dealt with that nobody wanted to touch. And so I think that much of the communication around this is just a way to spin and stick a knife in Trump, whereas his administration has been consistent, hitting the same note the entire time throughout. What do you think about that? Amin?
I really like that. I'm going to quote Victor Davis Hanson. So he in one of his podcasts, one of my favorite classes is an historian. And so he says 2 points when you want to analyze current events. One, never base your analysis on 24 cycle news. And two, actually look at how the outside world is, like have empirical data. And CENTCOM is there, so trust CENTCOM. Those guys are there. They have the best equipments, so trust them. They are what America's achieved. They killed the supreme leader. The guy was heavily guarded. Like one of this guy that I mentioned that was his advisor. He said he was one of the most expensive security things around him. Was this guy heavily guarded? They managed to kill him. I mean, imagine how much they can humiliate them. They killed a lot of their IRGC. This is something. This is not nothing. How can you say Trump achieved nothing? I mean, this is just crazy.
Where I think that person's coming from is either a dishonest place on the front end, so like coming from the left, or and we've said the dissident right, but I was very much against the so-called panicans when the Operation Epic Fury started. And there's a whole different group that's panicking now, which is everyone outraged that this MOU exists. And I'm like you said, it's not legally binding. A whole bunch of stuff can still transpire. And I get that they wanted regime change in Iran for years, and I want that too. But I'm not willing to go down a very stupid road to get it. I think President Trump is a strategic player, the first we've really had since Nixon. We have to take advantage of every day he is president, and maybe before he leaves the White House, we will indeed get regime change within Iran. But I think that they had looked at the situation, and if 120% inflation, if that doesn't bring about a regime change, given that military and political leadership has been totally wiped out, and their military capacity, terrorist financing capacity severely affected, considering everything that's happened, if the regime is still standing, the people haven't risen up in that space by now, you're certainly saying no to putting boots on the ground to force it. Because I think President Trump has learned, he didn't learn it personally, he learned it via watching, but he was pretty critical of the nation building forever wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think he doesn't want to go down that road. This is a very different road than that. And that's what people should have always realized.
And just to build off of that, and this is something that Trump said in his press conference at the G7, talking about not going down stupid roads to try to get regime change in Iran. He said, he brought up Herbert Hoover, Republican president. And he said he doesn't want to end up like Hoover. So look, if we have to get an MOU and have a pause in this operation so that global oil supplies can flow, and that we're not getting into a situation where we're destabilizing the entire global economy because of this operation, that's a perfectly sensible route to take. The Iran question is going to continue so long as the regime is there, and we are the ones that are holding the cards here. So if we want to pause, allow oil to flow, the Iranians need it to flow. They need to sell oil. They need the money. All of the countries that are reliant on the Gulf need it to flow, or the Strait, I should say, need it to flow. So this is not a surrender. This is a strategic move. It's not worth throwing the global economy into a tailspin just to force this operation. So I think, like you said, Trump is being very pragmatic.
That's very fair. What would you think?
I would add to that, like, they can sell as much as oil they want, but their assets are going to be in a bank. So this is going to calm the oil markets. And the good thing about the MOU is that they're not going to get the money. So because America has to, give the OFAC licenses for any bank. They have a lot of, networks in Malaysia, Hong Kong, and they're not going to be able to give them money. So this is a good thing from the MOU. It's not legally binding. It gives the upper hand to America and the lower hand to them. And if that results to something like the Japan style surrender, why not? I mean, you can put a photo up. They can sign their surrender paper, and that's great.
By the way, the end of World War II, I think, forever warped so many people's minds about how wars actually end. That was actually the exception of the rule. Wars rarely end in such a neat little moment like that.
With unconditional surrender, you mean?
No, I'm talking about unconditional surrender.
Yeah. Occupation.
You're on a boat. You're signing. This is a definite end. Normally, wars peter out and end in stages, and only are truly understood through the lens of history years later, looking back. And it is largely it's a multi-generational conflict, has historically been how wars go about. And, like World War I had an ending. We had a nice Treaty of Versailles. We had a conference, one of the most written about and criticized treaties ever. I mean, yes, it was an end. It literally it ended on the 11th day in November of the 11th month at 11 a.m. Talk about an ending, a specific ending. But that was such an unsatisfactory moment. It set in stage and in motion World War II, an even more devastating global conflict than World War I. So I think those are exceptions to the realm of geopolitics, course of diplomacy, and statecraft, that where Clausewitz is right. War is a continuation of politics by other means. But just because that is so, there's serious heads of state, serious state actors, statecraft. You're going to pull that back and go back into the realm of politics, international diplomacy, when you see the opening and when it makes sense to.
Yeah.
So I got one more question for you.
Wait. I
What's
just want to throw in one more example of Trump being pragmatic. A lot of people were complaining that this MOU would give Iran way too much. But in there, when we first of all, it's an MOU. It's not a deal.
Mm-hmm.
We still have to get to a deal, and the deal would be part of Trump's red line: no nukes ever,
no enrichment.
Yeah, and no enrichment, no pathway to a nuclear weapon for Iran. And then they would have their sanctions lifted. They would essentially be treated like a normal country. And I think that a lot of people were upset with that language. And Trump also discussed this in his press conference at the G7 regarding, say, Iran having ballistic missiles, Iran having access to world markets. Iran, if they behave and stop pursuing these extreme militaristic goals, they should be able to be allowed to be treated like any other country in the international community and trade and not have sanctions on them forever. And I should say, we shouldn't have our foot on their neck economically and militarily forever. All they have to do is abide by these simple red lines.
Right.
And I think that a lot of people got upset about when Trump mentioned that in his G7 press conference. But I think that's perfectly reasonable. What do you think?
I agree. It's in the context of Iran just behaving like a normal nation. You have your neighbors there. You have UAE, you have Bahrain. They're selling their oil, their gas. They're prosperous. Why don't you want to be like them?
I'm trying to think about their perspective. I'm trying to think about where the Iranians are coming from. Understand your enemy is how you beat your enemy, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm wrong, call me out. But so far, I've seen, not even in my lifetime alone, in all of our lifetimes, the allies of Iran be either through civil war, through actual war, through the Arab Spring in 2014, I think it was, 13, I think it was.
Arab Spring was in 2009.
All right. The Arab Spring was still a thing. But regardless, I was 8 years old, Troy. No, I'm trying to think of they have no allies left. They have nobody left. Iraq was invaded in 2003. And I think the same year they took out Saddam. Maybe it was the following.
They were not allies either. They were.
They fought for 10
I would
years.
argue the Iraq War created,
but Troy,
a side for them. But
they were united in many aspects.
Well, they fought each other for a decade.
They did. So there's that, and then there's Syria. Maybe they weren't perfect allies.
Yeah.
There's people. Egypt's a good example, I think. And I'm beginning to see kind of a defensive posture taken from them. And now they're being very offensive, but I kind of understand the rationale where all the Eastern nations, are being toppled, whether it be by the United States or by Israel. And now you see more and more Middle Eastern countries aligning themselves with the United States and aligning themselves with Israel. And it looks like Iran's the final kind of country holding out in that region that is not necessarily pro-Western or pro-Israel for that matter. do you think there's, well, I guess what's the best way to phrase this question? Do you think their line of reasoning makes sense? It seems to me like they're the final people holding out.
It doesn't. I mean, look, but we have to ask why.
And I'm not defending them, by the way. I'm just
No,
saying.
Yeah,
you know,
why?
by
How
the
do we
way.
let us understand the
So
adversary?
it really goes like in a ideological religious sense. You really have to take religion seriously in that region. So when you define interest, you should not only define it as material interest, you should also define it as this kind of interest that they see that if they resist, because they're emulating this guy called Hussein, like 1,400 years ago, that he resisted this other, caliph, and when he died, they're going to go to heaven. So, I mean, the real life is there, not here.
Yeah.
So if they resist America, which is, the great Satan, and even if they die, they're still going to get rewarded.
Mhm.
So it doesn't matter, like, what happens to them. Whatever you say, they're going to win. It's a saying that whatever you say to these folks, they'll say, we are the winners. But and they look at it that way. They say, this world is not important. The other world is, and we're going to get our reward there. So
Right.
that's how they look at it. And it's interesting when you see their networks, the Shiites in Hezbollah, they have the same mentality. Assad, he was from a Shiite sect in Syria, the Alawites, same mentality. These small Shiite proxies they had in Iraq, same mentality. They're just, breeding these crazy, literally crazy people in that area.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm, by the way, I brought up Iraq because, again, that's at the time, anti-Western and also anti-Israel. They weren't exactly best friends, but that's the reason I bring up those different countries. When it comes,
want to add, sorry, that
course.
just look at how simple things could be, because you have a regime that many of their folks are corrupt. Okay, is it easier for you guys to sell your oil and keep the money under sanctions or evading the sanctions? Of course, it's easier without the sanctions. Like if you guys make peace with America, you can sell your oil much easier and not go through all this hassle of having all these. Why don't you do it? I mean, this is such a simple question. I don't understand, unless you guys are clearly crazy. But if some of them are not crazy, their whole legitimacy is based on this small group of very determined religious fanatics,
Right.
that are willing to kill people in the streets.
Another thing I would say, and this is what has always put me in the camp of this isn't a repeat of recent history. Iraq is a created state that comes out of World War I.
Yeah.
Iran is backed by a people and a civilization that's the Persian civilization that's 2,000 years old. And I think the people who are
Many would say much older. About 4,000?
4,000?
2,500.
2,500?
That's like
Okay.
you have the first
2,500.
state,
We'll split the difference. The 2,500 years.
Yeah.
This is an ancient civilization. And I think anyone who looks at the history with the long lens that it deserves and applies that to their geopolitical thinking, I think it's really regrettable that Iran has been captured by this fundamentalist sect in perspective, because imagine, and maybe it's not anytime soon, maybe it will take longer, but whenever it does indeed come back, you don't just like China doesn't totally wipe out. There's still a civilization that predates communism, and the same situation would be there with the ancient Persian civilization, which really predates most civilizations that are kind of around the world today, which have seen so much change over time. And so I can't help but see the potential for the region and the world in a future date, whenever that is, of when this regime peters out, however it's going to be. I do think there's a much more unified perspective on what an aftermath could be vis-a-vis Iraq, where you had the Sunni element, which is the majority, you had Shia, and then you also had the Kurds, who had their own statehood ambitions going back to ancient time, World War I. They wanted a state then, have consistently, honestly, been one of the more reliable partners for the United States, time and time again, have gotten the short end of the stick. But I think we're dealing with a totally different aftermath. Iraq's aftermath being a quagmire was very foreseeable. I don't think Iran's aftermath needs to be like that. I think it can be cleaner. That being said, I think one of the ways it is cleaner is if it's the people doing it rather than presence of a foreign power on the ground looking like occupiers. That right there, I think would bring about. I think it needs to happen. It didn't happen in this window, but that would have been the A+ victory. Instead, it's a B+ victory. Is still pretty good.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Still pretty good. And I want to ask you the question, like the question of all questions, and then I want to take some questions from our audience on Facebook and YouTube relating to the club in general, different events throughout the world. MOU. Neither side's going to budge. What will it take to get a deal?
I mean, the red lines are pretty sure. Give up your enrichment program, act like a normal nation, and then you're welcome to the club of nations that want to, do business together.
The reasonable ones.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't do that, as President Trump said, we're going to bomb you again. And, tough luck for you. If you
There you
choose that
go.
path.
There you go. So it really just comes down to the enrichment,
It's really
essentially.
bad. Yeah. And I would argue that, so this is when we say boots on the ground, immediately everybody goes to American boots on the ground. You don't need that. You can have actually Israeli boots on the ground, and they are willing to go there, and they have actually been there. So last year when they had their 12-day war, there were Israelis and Iranians who were helping them in Tehran and outside that were doing some covert operations. So yeah, you don't need Americans can America can help Israel with intelligence, logistics, but I think they are very capable of even enacting regime change.
Israel's capable of enacting regime
I think
change.
so. Because for a regime change, all you need is a very determined minority. You don't need majority of people going in the streets.
3% is the number I always see.
Exactly.
Batted around.
Yeah.
To basically overturn a state's regime.
And you need the will of the government to collapse, not to be able to kill the people anymore. Which is exactly what happened in '79. The Shah didn't want to kill anyone, and there was a minority of people very determined.
Is there a good read on the median person in Iran? What they?
It's a great question.
Because that to me is everything. If you get them off, okay, I'm done supporting the government. I'm going to consider that. Where are they sitting? Are they just sort of like? Are they like us? I think the median American is sitting on the sideline, confused by modern politics. But because they're on the sidelines, whoever's more determined within the two bases is going to largely control things. And then is that base growing vis-a-vis the other one? So what's that median person, thinking? And I don't know if you know the answer. That I'm not putting you on the spot here. Don't mean to, but what's your speculation?
So
I guess
it's very interesting. So in January they had an uprising, and who did the uprising? It was the Bazari guys, the people who are doing business, which are the most conservative in any country. They don't want to lose their business. They did the uprising, and so this is very telling. And then after that, other segments of people, but the regime really cracked down brutally on them. It's reported that around 30 to 40,000 people have been killed. And, if you put yourself in the shoes of the normal Iranians, it's going to say, I don't want to die,
Right.
But if they see the regime weak enough, they will rise. Because after January, I think it was, very clear to anyone, even the gray section of the country, that this is public enemy number one.
Yeah.
You have to get rid of it. So if the regime can be weakened enough, I'm pretty sure the Iranians themselves, and if they get some arms, like a small elite that Israelis can train, I think they will be very easily toppled. I mean, they are paper tiger.
Yeah.
They're not that strong.
That's fair. That's fair. I know, the 92 million people number comes up. I can't even talk. I got to lock in. 92 million population. However, how many of them are supportive? That's a good question, Troy. Do you guys want to read some comments?
Yeah, what are the audience?
Let's get us some comments. This is not just about Iran. This is about a bunch of stuff. Producer Serge DM'd me in the middle of this conversation. He said, "Hey, we have a lot of comments," and I just looked at it.
comments.
A lot of it's about South Africa. We have a lot of that coming up to you shortly. From Christine, I believe her name is Christine. Thank you to the NYYRC for your involvement in South Africa's White Cross Project. Christine, we love you. We love the Afrikaners, folks. I'm seeing here So
Well,
Nell,
the next segment, we're going to touch on that.
yeah, we got a lot coming up on that. So I'm seeing a lot of love from South Africa here.
Wow. Thank you, guys. We
This
love
is-
South Africa.
this
Love
is
South
in-
Africa.
Probably more comments about South Africa than Iran, to be honest with you guys. This is insane. And then I wanted to highlight one person before we get to our next segment, Sarah. Sarah said, my question is related to South Africans already in America, not on refugee status, who saw the dangers and are in asylum process. Can someone maybe hear us and advocate for us? The South Africans being persecuted that are essentially in asylum process. President Trump has, I believe, Troy, I know you know the numbers better than me,
Yeah.
admitted pretty much only South Africans so far for asylum.
Yeah, basically. And I honestly, I hope that I think that should continue to be the case. The asylum system has been abused in our country for a long time, but I think South Africans have a legitimate case for asylum. And what I've noticed with those that have come here so far is an incredible appreciation for the American way of life.
Yeah.
And I the word you used to describe this many times in the last year, civilizational kin.
Yeah.
I think's huge.
Well,
Expand on that.
Yeah, we've had such a horrible immigration system in the U.S. for decades, essentially opening up the floodgates to the entire third world. But the South Africans in particular are very similar to foundational Americans, especially the Americans that pioneered the Midwest and the open territories. Their story has a lot of parallels with the stories of the Afrikaners who settled in Cape Town and then went on the Great Trek north, and they lived in covered wagons. They have the Protestant religious tradition, and they created a civilization out of a wilderness, much like the American pioneers did.
And I want to read a second comment that Sarah left that basically almost mirrors what you said. I myself survived a farm attack and came here to work on H-2A with my children to keep them safe. America has been healing my trauma, and the safety it gives, I could never explain. I am so grateful to the United States of America. Sarah, we love you. We love you. Welcome to the United States.
Thank you so much.
That's so
Thank you.
heartwarming.
And
That's
I
like
think-
so much.
And Amin has said this on a show before, and not to paraphrase what your words, Amin, but you said that something to the effect that America is the force for good in the world. Without America, it's very likely that the world would be run by all sorts of horrible despots.
absolutely.
That I hope one day to hear from people in Iran, assuming that we can have the A+ ending to this, where the regime and the religious fanatics are toppled and removed from power, and that the Iranians can also have a normal country which can build on that 2,500-year-old tradition of the Persian civilization, which to me is, like you said, Troy, it's regrettable that right now it's in such poor shape, hijacked by these Shia religious fanatics. And we just should take a moment to appreciate America. They put down America. In Julia's reality check, she did a great job of getting some videos together of tourists that have come to visit. When I lived abroad for many years, from 2016 to 2019, the international media was just full of lies and vitriol about what it's like to live in America. If you rely on the news, corporate news, for what is going on in the United States, you would think that it was just a total chaotic fascist dictatorship.
The purge, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when people come and see what America is really like, or people that are aware of what it's really like, they're much more appreciative. So for our South African friends, we hear you. We know about your struggle, and this club is doing whatever we can to bring that to light with our President Trump. And we're actually putting on our White Cross initiative, our White Cross Memorial, in September. I think it's I don't want to get the date wrong, but I think it's in the latter part of September. Where
I think it's late September.
Yeah, we're going to have 3,000 white crosses bringing awareness to the farm murders in South Africa put on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. We're going to bring some survivors, and they're going to have a testimonial about what's really going on in South Africa. And we're going to continue bringing awareness to this issue and putting pressure on the South African government to respect the human rights of everyone in South Africa.
Absolutely. Before we go to our next segment, Amin, where can we find you? YouTube, X, Facebook, where can we find you? Instagram?
I'm on Instagram mostly, but I don't tweet or do some stories. So
Right. Where can we find your show?
From now on, I can do it.
But for real, people need this information. There's so much bad information about what's going on in the Iran war, and almost all of it's a spin to try to attack Trump. So somebody that grew up in Iran, you are Persian, and you're extremely knowledgeable about geopolitics, and you just bring such a reasonable, well thought out explanation to some of these problems that we're facing. And people are confused and they need answers like the ones that you bring. And that's why we keep bringing you on this show. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And I really like what you said about America. And basically, America is the defender of the Western civilization. And the Western civilization is something good. It's achieved incredible things, lower the rates of mortality, higher GDP after the Enlightenment. I mean, why don't you want to be like that? That's and it's only America who is defending that. It's Europeans are not doing it. Nobody is doing it. So it's America doing that. So, and I really think Americans should be proud of that. And the self-hating Americans, I see them sometimes, and I travel a lot to Europe, and I see them acting like that towards European, and I'm defending America in front of other people. I'm like, don't talk about America like that. They're actually defending this entire civilization, which is a force of good, like literally a force of good. So yeah, I hope patriotism is a virtue. It's an ancient virtue, goes back to the Greeks. So it's good to nurture it.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like the Iran, I won't call it a deal. What's happening with Iran is at a standstill, but making progress.